So this webinar tonight is about the personal statement. It's a really topical subject, which I know that many people have been asking us questions about. So today we are going to be talking all about the dentistry personal statements, everything that you need to know from our opinions. We've got a team and a panel of not only dental students, but those individuals who also hold offers for dentistry in the UK and also recently qualified dentists from UK universities. A little bit about what we're planning to cover tonight. So obviously we're going to be talking a little bit about what we do and what we offer as an organisation, a little bit about that. In addition to that, we'll be talking about the statement, why it's key, how to prepare for this, and how to make your statement stand out. We'll be talking about ideas. Oops, sorry about that. We'll be talking about how to prepare. Might be easy if I do this. How to prepare and make your statement stand out. The ideal structure and getting started. What to include and what to avoid. Assessing your own statement. Another question that we get is, should I choose medicine? Should I choose dentistry? We'll also be touching upon that. And then we'll be going through some personal statements as well at the end to show you exactly how to structure a personal statement, which will be really useful. Just in terms of who we are a team of not only dentists, but dental students, those with offer holders and young qualified dentists from all around the UK. So we're very experienced in terms of our sort of knowledge base and our team. We cover a lot of information, and our website, which is shortly going to be launched, contains lots of information with regards to helping those individuals for their dentistry application, and takes them through all the different stages, right from work experience, personal statements, to even after attaining an offer, and even supporting those individuals who may not be successful. We've got various services, and the services which we're really excited to talk to you about, as well as the dentistry experience course, which is like an online course which ultimately aims to give individuals a greater career insight into dentistry. So it's fantastic for those individuals who've had their work experience cancelled, and that'll be completely free. So we're really excited to share that with you. And we've also got our other services. As you may be aware, we're running UCAT lessons at the moment, which are designed to help those individuals studying for the UCAT. And just a quick note on that, UCAT have officially announced that they will be going ahead with their assessment, but for this 2020 applicants, they can have a choice of either sitting it from home or the traditional route, which is sitting it at their Pearson VUE assessment centres. So the test dates, I believe, are from August, and UCAT have actually advised individuals to sit the test as early as possible due to the ongoing sort of unpredictability nature and the uncertainty that COVID-19 unfortunately brings. And obviously we have got a book which is coming out. Every week we are actually giving this book away for free. All people have to do is take a picture of the screen and simply share the photo on their Instagram page. I know that we sometimes get questions, if you don't have an open profile, that's absolutely fine. Just share it with your Instagram followers and then just send us a screenshot. We have got a sign up form for this book, which entitles you to 50% off as well, which will be shown to you at the end. Okay, so I'm going to get on to the main bulk of the presentation now. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Anam Chaudhry, who has recently qualified from the University of Birmingham. She's now a qualified dentist. but she has got lots of experience, obviously, with regards to writing a personal statement. So, Anam, do you want to turn your mic on?
Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Right. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me, Cal. So I'm just going to talk a bit more about why your statement is actually key to your application. So when you apply, it almost feels like you're a small fish in a really big bowl. Everyone has to have very similar predicted grades. Your UCAT needs to be really, really similar. And eventually you're on the same level as many other applicants. So this is where your personal statement will come in. Your personal statement allows you to really express yourself, to showcase yourself. Once you've passed the basic academic threshold, your statement then read by an admissions officer in an effort to try and identify you as the ideal student. So it's really, really important that you use your personal statement as an opportunity to show yourself off, to tell the university why you are amazing, and to tell them how much work you've put in towards your application as well. And essentially, your personal statement acts as a checklist towards the university, and they'll use that checklist to try and identify you as an ideal student for them. So I think it's important for us to also say that the personal statement is doesn't hold the same amount of importance in every dental school. However, it's still really, really important because it can be used to differentiate between two candidates that have very, very similar rankings. It can be used to question you in the interview as well. Not all dental schools will use your personal statement in the interview, but some will. So it's really important that you know your personal statement inside out and that you don't lie in your personal statement. We've got a bit more about this later on as well. And so I think the basics of a personal statement is always the same. Certain dental schools will look for different things as compared to other dental schools, but the crux of the personal statement is always the same. So I've tried to summarize the personal statement into three main sections. So when an admissions officer will look at your personal statement, they'll be looking for your motivation. So why do you want to study dentistry? They'll be looking for your exploration. So what have you learned about dentistry? And what actions have you taken to try and learn further about dentistry? And they'll also be looking for your suitability. So what skills do you have as a student that holds you above other students? And also, do you have the skills to be an ideal dentist and an ideal university student? So that was the main basics of the personal statement. And then I just added a tip. I just added a few tips for myself. So initially, when I started the personal statement, I found it quite overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to have a Word document and not really know what to say. So I would say that the earlier that you start your personal statement, the better it is. And make sure that you're getting it checked again, and having somebody objective checking it is also really useful as well. I think some people are saying it's maybe my mic's not loud enough. I don't know. I think can you guys hear me okay?
I think it is a little bit croaky, a little bit muffled. However,
okay.
I would say that if everyone can turn their sound off and ensure that they are muted, that should help with the audio.
Okay.
But if you come a little bit close to the mic and maybe speak a little bit louder, that should help.
Okay. Do you want me to just quickly go through it in a minute? Is that better? Okay. So I'll just basically go through quickly. I'll do a quick summary of what I said. So I just said that the UCAT, so your personal statement acts as an opportunity to kind of showcase yourself, to tell the university why you are amazing, why you deserve a place at the university, and essentially your personal statement acts as a checklist towards the university. The statement is sometimes used in an interview, and it's used to question you, and so it's really important for you to know what you have put in your statement inside out, and also don't lie in your personal statement as well. Sometimes a personal statement will be used as to identify you between two similar ranking applicants, so therefore you need to put effort into your personal statement as well. There's three main key areas of a personal statement that admissions officers are looking for. So they'll be looking for your motivation, so why you want to study dentistry. They'll be looking for your exploration, what have you done to learn about dentistry, and your suitability, what skills do you have that make you a good fit for dentistry and for the university as well. And then I think I just added a little bit onto the end about starting it the earlier the better, because initially can be quite overwhelming, and getting it checked again and again. I think that was all of it. I'm sorry, wasn't that clear?
Okay, we've got Jasleen up next. Talk about how you can prepare to make your statement stand out.
Right, hi guys. So this is just a quick overview of how you can make it stand out. We'll be going into a lot more detail of each one as the webinar goes on. So the first thing is making sure you have something to write about. So before you even start, just make sure that, like we said in the previous slide, you're meeting those 3 things. So do you have the motivation? What have you actually done about it? So have you gone out and got work experience? Have you held any roles of responsibilities in your school? And have you got things to show off the good skills needed for dentistry? So like leadership, teamwork, communication, manual dexterity, all those things. Have you gone out there and actually tried to meet those? Because without actually having something to write about, you won't really have a very interesting personal statement, and you don't want it to be generic. So really just try and find things that will kind of meet those expectations in advance, so that you've got a longer list that you can choose from later on. You're not like trying to pick the things. The next thing is to look at successful examples. So I think we'll be doing this at the end, going through some with you, but it will really help because it kind of gives you that motivation and that sort of guidance of where things went, what things they're looking for, what makes you suitable, things like that. So it is a good thing to just have a look at, and it'll help you know where to start to. Make a points list. So I can't stress this enough, it really does help. If you just get a blank piece of paper, write out what you think good attributes are for a dentist. So if you look at your dental experiences, did they communicate well with you? Like, do they work in a really big team? Things like that. So write that all down and see if you compare something you've done with that. So for example, if you had teamwork down as one of the skills, can you pair something you've done with that? So have you played for a sports team, or have you worked in a job where you've had to work with lots of different people? And see if you can make a list that matches up, because that will show all your skills in a list, and you can then easily pick out the ones that you think, right, these are really good and I should talk about them, or you know what, this is not that interesting. So that's where you'd start. So then you can pick where you want to be, how you want to lay out your statement, and then from there you peer review. So you get someone to look at that list and be like, does anything pop out to you? Do you think that any of these look really interesting and you haven't heard before? Because often you might misjudge yourself and think, actually, you know, I'm that's not really interesting to me because I do that all the time. But actually it might be something that no one's ever done before. So get someone to look at it. And again, I think we'll talk about it a bit later, but peer reviews are really important, but you don't want to overdo it with peer review. So you don't want to keep going to different people, because it can often sort of get muddled up, and you can get sort of different answers from different people, and it can stress you out. So kind of think of someone that's really good at this sort of thing. So for me, we had a teacher at school who helped people with the medical and dental schemes. So she was really good person to go to, and a lot of people forgot to utilize her. So I'd say if you have someone who's helped previous years get into dentistry, that's where you'd start. Go to them, ask for their advice, ask them to look through your list and get as much feedback as you can. Start early. I didn't realize how long a personal statement can take someone. It took me forever. So don't rush it, because you do need that time to keep looking over it, making sure your grammar is correct, making sure you're using the right points. It takes more time than you expect. So starting the list now is better than leaving it like 2 weeks before you have to submit it and frantically typing away. So start early. And the last point is reduce or generic points. If you think about how many personal statements a university has to read through, yours has to stand out. If it looks like someone else's, or looks like, you know, the person before you, they're just going to put it in the pile that is like, oh, maybe, I don't know, it didn't really spark my interest. So if it doesn't seem interesting, take it out. You've got a word count limit. So, you know, really think of what makes you stand out, what makes you different to other people, what showcases you in the best light, what makes you a best candidate, and like, honestly, just what will wow them. What do you think is like, actually, that will make a good dentist, or they've gone that extra mile to try and show their good attributes. And that's basically all the points, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. So we're now moving on to the structure of the personal statement. And for this, I'm going to introduce Arij and Bilal for this part. So if you could kindly pop your mics on.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Cal. So Bilal and I are going to be going through the ideal structure you should follow when writing a personal statement. So first of all, a unique introduction is what you should ideally start off with. So this should be short and powerful and aims to draw the reader in. So imagine how many personal statements the admission team have read, like Jasleen said. You want to make sure that yours is different and that it's going to stand out in some way. And the introduction should be centered around your initial interest in dentistry and why you want to pursue a career in dentistry in the first place. So some really good questions to think about and to ask yourself when you're writing this is, why do you want to study dentistry? What inspired you to apply for dentistry? For example, like a specific case you saw in work experience or something that happens in your life. And some other questions, what do you find interesting about dentistry that some other careers don't have? And Bilal has some other things to add to this.
Yeah, so firstly, just to re-emphasize the point that Arij made, the introduction should quite simply just answer why you want to do dentistry. I feel like a lot of personal statements, especially in the earlier drafts, they can get a bit sidetracked. Like you can have a lot of really like interesting cases to write about, but just make sure that you're focusing on that question. Ultimately, that's the question that you're answering in the introduction. So stick to it, and don't try and cramp too much into it. Keep it short, snappy, and powerful. And I think that's what makes one of the best introductions. Secondly, in terms of your motivations for going into dentistry, make sure that it's centered around caring for people, the reward you get from the career, the sort of mental and physical impact you can have on people. A lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people do start talking about like the money side of things, and that maybe dentists have easy lifestyles. That's not necessarily true, and it's not what should really be driving your interest to pursue the career. So just be wary of that. It can be a red flag, so just stay away from it.
Yes. Okay, and the second part of your personal statement is past experiences. So this part and part 3 is what should make up the bulk of your personal statement. And for number 2, you want to be talking about work experience you've had in a healthcare setting or volunteering. So for example, if you had work experience in a dental clinic or if you volunteered in a hospital or something like that. Obviously, because of COVID-19, you might not have all of these at the moment, and that's okay. Some universities have said they are going to be more lenient with this, but like we said, we're releasing the dentistry past experience course that will be available to you soon. So that would count as work experience, definitely. And the main thing to think about with this is you want to be reflecting on what you've learned. You don't want to be listing so many things over and over again, because that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've had work experience at 5 dental clinics if you can't reflect on them properly. If you do one and talk about it really well, that will be a lot better. So yeah, Bilal, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add a few things. So firstly, I feel like in the work experience paragraph, what a lot of people do is start to use really big terminology and start to write too much dental jargon into this paragraph. Remember to keep it simple. What's going to impress the universities is your ability to reflect and the skills which you've seen being applied to specific contexts which you can take lessons from. Using big words and referencing big treatments, whilst they can be very interesting, if they're not being reflected on well, it doesn't add much to your personal statement. So yeah, don't think that including loads of complex medical jargon is going to boost your personal statement, because Remember, it's the personal statement. It should be your voice that comes through. So just keep it real, and don't try and show off too much, but be reflective on the skills. I'd say that's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly as Bilal said. And I saw someone ask a question saying, what do you mean by reflect? So by reflect, we mean, what have you learnt from seeing a certain case? So for example, did you notice the way that the dentist spoke to the patient? Like, did they use clear communication or something like that? And what does this mean? So it means that the dentist, you need to have good communication skills, because as a dentist, you're explaining really complex things to someone who might not have a background in science like you do. So that's what we mean by reflect. So what have you learned? Okay, and then moving on to part 3, this is super and extracurriculars. So with this, we're talking about anything else that you took part in that will show you are a well-rounded person, and what skills you learned from this that links to dentistry. So examples can include EPQ, sports, arts, talks you attended, or anything like that. So for example, if your EPQ was science related, how can you link that to dentistry? And if you're part of a sports team, what skills did that teach you that you can link to dentistry? Yeah, Bilal?
Yeah, so I think one thing to be careful of with your super and extracurricular is to not sound too listy, because I'm sure a lot of you will have done a lot of volunteering, loads of courses, because I know you guys have all been making use of like webinars and stuff, the Dentistry Future Learn course. You have a massive bank of things to reference in this section, but make sure that you don't make it look like a list. Instead, for each experience that you've done, be it academic, be it volunteering, make sure you're still drawing upon the skills you learned, talk about what you enjoyed, because it's all well and good to have done all of these things, but like Arij said before, the key skill is reflection, and it's showing the universities what you've learned from each of these experiences. That's probably the key thing I can get across for the super and extracurriculars.
Okay, and moving on to the last part, a well-rounded conclusion. So the whole point of this is just like the introduction, to be really short, but it should be well-rounded and kind of just brings together your personal statement and finalizes it. So it should leave a good impression on the reader and make them want to invite you for an interview and get to know you further. And try to avoid finishing statements off from quotes, because it makes the statement feel less genuine and can put the reader off, because it's your personal statement. So don't bring in any quotes. And you want to come off as professional and well-rounded individual who knows what they want.
Yeah, just
and Bilal, do you want?
Yeah. So it's basically your last impression that you leave on them. So sure, you've got a good understanding of the career. You know, make sure that you show them that you're aware that there are challenges in dentistry, but ultimately the positives outweigh all of those, and show them that you're excited to start on, you know, hopefully a 5-year journey. But yeah, you cover everything quite well, Arij. I think that's it for this.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to guidance on getting started. So of course, with everything we mentioned, that can feel quite overwhelming, but we're going to give you some tips that you can start off with. So I would suggest start off by gathering your thoughts on why you want to study dentistry. So you can get a pen and paper or anything and just start bullet pointing. So why do I want to do dentistry? And thinking about the questions I mentioned earlier. So what have I experienced that led me to want to study this? Brainstorm your past experiences, supercurriculars and extracurriculars that you are thinking of talking about in your personal statement. And then think about what skills this has taught you that you can apply to a career in dentistry. So we've given you an example here. For example, if you're part of a football team, this has taught you teamwork skills. And of course, in dentistry, you have the dental team, so teamwork skills are really important in the career. And you've shown that you have good teamwork skills by being part of a football team. And after you gathered your thoughts and you've written a list, then you can start writing your personal statement, so a first draft. And you don't have to write it in order at first, because it's not going to be perfect straight away. You're going to have a lot of drafts, and that's okay. Even if you start with your middle part, for example, and then you start building up on it. because as you go along, you can keep checking it. You can get someone you trust to read over it for advice. You can leave it for a few days and come back to it. And as you make these adjustments over time, you can start shifting things around and maybe adding new things or getting rid of and rewording some parts to make it shorter. Because of course, there's a word limit, as we know. But yeah, that's just some tips. Bilal, do you want to add?
Yeah, so I think we just covered everything pretty comprehensively, but there's a few things that I want to sort of suggest. So number one, whilst you are doing all of these plans, sometimes your school may tell you that it's okay or that it's recommended to talk about your A-level subjects in a dentistry personal statement. I think for most courses this is fine, but when you're applying to dentistry, there's no real need to mention your A-level subjects. Every single person applying, if not the majority, will be doing biology and chemistry and another A-level. So it's not important that you reflect on those because your universities will see in your UCAT application which A-levels you're sitting. So there's no need to place a huge emphasis on those or even mention them, in my opinion. In terms of prerequisite reading, whilst you're doing all of this in your planning, look into something called values-based recruitment. I remember when I went onto open days last year, I think Sheffield, Leeds, and a few other universities mentioned this idea. And 6 values, so care, compassion, competence, communication, courage, and commitment. And they want to see these really come through in your personal statement. So maybe think about how you can display all of these through your various activities. And another thing which I recommend reading, just for your own understanding, and it might trigger some thoughts, is the GDC's standards for the dental team. I remember I read through it before writing my personal statement, and the sub-guidelines had sort of little things that made me think, oh my God, I remember the dentist did this, and it helped to shape my own reflections of my work experience and stuff. So that's all I can add on, really. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just someone said how long is a personal statement, and yes, Catherine said it's 4,000 characters, which is still true, and that's the same as 47 lines and about 500 words. So yeah, it is quite short, so you have to make sure that you're fitting in quite a lot in a short amount of space. So that's why you have to make sure you're kind of condensing it. And someone also asked that they said they do graphics, which is quite different to
Like a normal
40. Oh wait, someone just asked. So it's 4,000 characters, which is 47 lines, and graphics is quite different to science subjects. And I would say that if you have something to say and you have a way of linking it to dentistry, then definitely mention it, because that is something different that might impress the admission team. So for example, I did media studies as the 3rd subject, which is quite different as well. And I managed to link that with promoting oral health using social media platforms and videos and stuff like that. So definitely talk about it if it's relevant. And yeah, that's all we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was fantastic. We have got some questions, but what we'll be doing is we'll be typing the answers for everyone. If we do miss anything, then please do type it again. I'm sure that we'll be able to answer everyone's questions tonight. So now we're going to talk about what to include and what to exclude. So Dr. Sharma is going to talk about this.
Okay, thanks Cal. Hopefully you can all hear me. So I've just graduated from Cardiff University and I've read through a lot of personal statements. So I just wanted to share my advice to hopefully make you feel a bit more confident and, you know, comfortable about what you should be including and excluding from in your personal statement. So firstly, of course, you want to say why you want to do dentistry. It might be you've done some research, you've had some dental treatment that's really impacted on your life, or of course you've done some work experience that you've really then reflected on. Of course, I know so many of you have missed out on work experience this year because of the pandemic. What I'd say is don't worry if that has happened to you. So, you know, what I'd say is research into the universities that you want to apply to and see what they have to say about the matter, because I've given Birmingham a Google and they actually have released a statement saying, we do want to really reassure you that you're not at a disadvantage if this year you haven't got that work experience. However, you should just gain some insight on what it is to be a dentist through some online resources. I know we've mentioned that the I Want to Be a Dentist team have got another webinar and a course coming up, which goes into it in more detail. But just some quick thoughts from me on what you can be doing instead is reach out to those dental practices that you were going to do work experience in, and you can still ask them the questions that you wanted to ask. Get in touch and see if you can just rearrange that work experience. It will show that you're really proactive and you're serious about that career in dentistry. And just do as much reading as you can around the subject, because it will really help you. So other things that you want to be including are your achievements and anything that you're proud of. I know so many of you would have got accomplishments from years ago that you've completely forgotten about, but this is really your chance to shine, and you want to get those experiences in the personal statement. Now, hobbies is probably one of my favourite sections. It's where you can really show the admissions tutors a better insight into who you are and what you enjoy doing other than school. So definitely write all of those down. Volunteering is almost essential. It will show that you're helpful and caring, which are really important traits to being a dentist. And then you want to show that you have a big understanding on what it is to actually be a dentist and why you think then you are suited to the profession. So some things now I will talk about what to exclude. So just echoing from before, terminology that you don't understand, it might just not read very well. Your amazing GCSE grades, they'll be able to see on your UCAS application, as well as they'll know your specifications. So don't waste your word limit. Dishonesty is a huge one. I would say it will come back in the actual interview stage and just knock you down, because you want to show that if you get any questions on hobbies or experience that you've had, you're passionate and you can explain about it. So if you're at the point now where you're thinking, I've got no hobbies, I'm not all rounded, it's not too late to pick up something like knitting or sewing or something right now even that you can write about to make it a little bit more interesting. Again, avoid the cost aspects or money, belittling other career options, lists which are pointless without a thorough explanation, and definitely do not copy anybody else's personal statement. So they'll pick up on it quite quickly if you do. So you want to just give yourself the best chance of really showing off who you are. And I'll just go ahead and answer any questions below now, but hopefully that's been useful, and I'll just hand back now to Cal.
That's great. Well, that was really, really useful. I think knowing what to include and what not to include is key. And hopefully we've shared a few pointers there to include in your statement. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, I know that we had a question regarding graduates. So I'm going to introduce Benicia, who is a graduate. So Bini.
Hi there, Cal. Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Just the presentation so that it reads smoothly. Bear with me. I think the presentation has just frozen slightly. Apologies. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat. We'll be able to answer those. We are going to be sharing this presentation on YouTube. We just had a question regarding that. I think the computer has decided to, unfortunately, stall on me, so I do apologize. But Vinny, do you want to continue without the presentation? I'll try to get it in the background whilst you're speaking.
Yeah, fine, that's no problem. Just give me a second. Okay, well, hi everyone. So I'm Binny. I'm a graduate student studying at Glasgow University in 4th year. Personal statements for graduates are going to be slightly different compared to personal statements overall for everyone. And this is a good thing because the way I look at it, when you do a personal statement, imagine you have about a minute or less than a minute where everything you put down has to have an impact to the reader of this. So most people, they're going to start their personal statements with their motivation or some sort of hobby or something they've done. With graduates, the way I recommend starting it is putting your degree down. So within the first paragraph, really put down what degree you're doing, what you're studying, and how that's impacting your decision on doing dentistry. So why is your degree or the time you've been at university relevant to your decision in doing dentistry in the future? That already will separate you from everyone else, and now you're in the group of graduates that you have to then distinguish yourself between. So it gives you a different sort of look for the person reading it. So when you're doing with your degree, it's really good to write down what you've learned in your degree, what you've learned in your time doing your degree, and how that's helped you grow as a person, and how that's helped you move towards dentistry. So has it been the interaction you've had with your peers? Have you done some research on the side with one of the lecturers? Is it a degree in a totally different area? So is it biomedical, biomedical sciences, a different background? That's then help you decide you want to do dentistry. Then start looking at what's your motivation for dentistry in general. So the reader now has understood why you've done your degree, how this helped you move towards dentistry. What else is your motivation towards being a dentist or to want to do dentistry? As some of my peers have mentioned before, write everything down on a piece of paper, because it then helps you put down from the list that you've got some really important ones that you're then going to put down in your personal statement, rather than putting every single point you can. And that's one of the reasons why there's actually a character limit or a line limit in this. Just so it helps you not waffle, basically. Another one as well that you get when doing degree is look at time management. So while you've been doing degree, have you done anything else while you're doing it? For example, are you part of any clubs, like a hockey club or rock climbing or some sort of club with a group of people? Do you volunteer anywhere? Is it a regular volunteering job that you have, or is this just a one-off that you do here and there? Or do you have a job on the side of your degree? And that's really, really important, because all of these show that you're not just sitting and studying the whole time, but you've also got more to your life. You've got more to enrich the university you can be part of. And that's what they're looking for. Are you going to be, one, a good dentist, but also are you going to give something back to the university, and how are you going to help other peers around you? Another really good one is in your final year. Sorry if you can hear that. I'm near Heathrow, so there's a lot of planes in the background. Another really good point is in your final year, you normally do a project or a dissertation that's really in-depth and detailed. You could actually do a voluntary one, something you want to do it on, rather than the ones that are given to you. This is a great way to do something within dentistry. It, one, shows your passion, and two, you then get to do it on any area you want within dentistry. And then that's a really good point to put down in your personal statement. So with me personally, I did a dissertation on local anesthetics in dentistry, the sort of where they started from, where the future potential was, and talked all about that. And that was off my own back. And then to do that, I had to liaise with the pharmacology lecturer. So it's really good to start doing that and getting those connections, because one, you've obviously shown you've got a passion for dentistry, you've done that, but also you've then got a really good rapport with one of the lecturers, and that's great for if you need a referee later on. So for your UCAT or for anything else, you've got someone there that actually knows you a lot better. It was mentioned before, reflection's really, really important. Now, we all think that we can reflect really, really well. I mean, we do it without thinking sometimes in a lot of different scenarios. But when you're consciously thinking about reflecting, sometimes it's hard, and it is a skill you develop and you work on and work on. So even right now, after this webinar, sit down with a piece of paper and write down, what did I learn from it? What were some good points? What were some negative points? What am I going to take away from this? That will start to help you develop the skills you need later on. Again, with your personal statement, it's been mentioned before by my peers that you're going to have God knows how many drafts and versions of it. I think I had like over 20 when I did mine. And that's totally normal. So reflect on each one. What are you changing? What are you doing? What's more important to put down in there? Really, really good skill to learn. So with the reflection, with your degree, what did you learn from it? What were some good points? What were some bad points? How have you adapted? How's that reflected you, molded you to the person you are now? How's it going to help you towards dentistry? And be genuine. I think that's really, really important. It is your personal statement. It's personal to you. So yeah, you can have input from your friends, your family, your referee, teachers, whoever you like around you, and that's absolutely fine. But don't let them put their own words and write it for you to the point it doesn't sound like you anymore. Okay, so make sure it still sounds like you. Some things to exclude from there, I think they've all been mentioned before. But one of the points that I'm just going to, a few points I'm just going to re-emphasize is plagiarism. It's really, really important. You learned it in school, you learn it again in university. There's software that you have to put everything through to make sure you haven't plagiarized, but do not plagiarize. It's really, really important that it sounds like you, it's genuine to yourself, and it's not stolen from someone else's work. When you have your interviews for universities, they can have a station that looks at your personal statement. And if they're reading it back to you and it's not in your own words, it's not you, and it's been taken from other sources, it comes across like that as well. And they can sense it as well. So you don't plagiarize, write it exactly how you would. Don't lie or use big words as well. Again, as mentioned before, don't use any jargon, anything you don't understand, just because it sounds smart. It will be read back to you, and then you don't want to be caught out. And I think that's it from my point of view. If there's any questions, please write them down in the chat. Cal, I think I'll hand it back to you if that's okay.
We're now moving on to how to assess your own personal statement. So Catherine is a university student at Newcastle. She's currently in her 4th year of study. So Catherine, would you like to talk a little bit about the assessment of personal statement?
Hi, yes, of course. So like Cal said, I'm Catherine. So I think most of the things we're going to talk about in this bit have already been mentioned. So a lot of people find it really difficult to assess your personal statement yourself, but we're just going to run through a few tips on how to help you out a bit. As I said, most of these points have already been mentioned in some form or another, but it's really important to kind of use them as a checklist when you're reading through your personal statement. So first of all, you need to make sure that your personal statement achieves all the things that you're trying to get across. So read it back and ask yourself these questions, whether or not does it fulfill the purpose. So if you could just go on to the next slide, Cal. Lovely. So first off, does it show that you possess the main qualities of a dentist? Does it show a motivation to study dentistry? Does it show a commitment to helping people? Does it show an interest in science and lifelong learning? And does it show an understanding of the realities and challenges of dentistry? So it's really key that you hit all these points in some form or another. If you could just go back to the last one. Yeah, lovely. It's really key that you hit all these points in some form or another. So put yourself in the shoes of someone reading this that doesn't know you at all and see if these things come across. If you think one of these points might be lacking, go back and try to elaborate on one of these areas. So for example, if you've shown a sustained commitment to helping people in your extracurriculars and hobbies. Ideal examples of this is an extended period of time working in retail or a care home or other voluntary program, just to really show that commitment, that like I think's been mentioned in the chat, that persistence really. So on to the next slide, just checking the content of the personal statement. So first off, make sure that you haven't repeated yourself anywhere. Try not to discuss several different things that all demonstrate the same skills. For example, if you've had 3 different mentoring jobs, you don't need to discuss all 3. Or if several things have helped you demonstrate teamwork, you don't need to mention all of them. Just try cut the others out. It's much better to demonstrate a variety of roles and skills rather than repeating the same limited skill set, as this can take up a lot of characters. Next, check that for every point you discuss, you've included a relevant example. Otherwise, the words are kind of meaningless, really. Specific examples are even better, such as specific patient encounters or cases that you've experienced. If you can discuss these in a bit more detail rather than just making general claims, it makes the personal statement much more individual to you and is much more believable that you actually took something away from that encounter and that experience. When you're reading through, also ask yourself whether or not what you've written relates back to dentistry. So especially with hobbies, is it time management, manual dexterity, or possibly one of the most important ones, actually a stress outlet? And that can be something really worth mentioning as well. So on to the next slide. This is just a list of lots of buzzwords that you can include in your personal statement. I'd recommend taking a photo of this. So try to include as many as you can. Lots of these words will really jump out at admissions tutors, and many will form the foundations of what you write. Obviously, this is a super long list, so don't try to include them all. Otherwise, that would take up your whole word limit. But I'd recommend obviously taking a photo and using this as kind of a mini checklist for when you're reading through your personal statement. Any words that you haven't included might jog your memory of a really key or important incident that you can include to demonstrate a particular quality as well. So I think Binny's going to talk about cutting down your personal statement next, because this can be a really key thing that lots of people really end up going over the word count.
So Binny's going to talk a little bit about this bit.
Yes, cutting it down. So what I would look at, and one of the things I mentioned before is, even though you're asking other people to keep your own words, obviously keep it so it's genuine to you, but try to ask lots of people to read it. So a good step when you're looking at cutting things down is take a break. Can't stress that enough. After my 10th draft of my personal statement, I think I went blind to all the words, and I was like, I just can't see anything different anymore. So take a break, go back into it the next day, after dinner, whatever, and just read through it casually. It makes a big difference. You'll see things in a different way, and you might read a sentence or two in a different way and actually think, I don't like the way it's worded, and change it down. Try to keep all sentences short and concise. You don't need to waffle on. You don't need them to be overly explained to the point where you think the person's not going to understand you. Give it to someone who doesn't understand science that much, or someone who, maybe someone found someone else that can just read it and say, yeah, I understand that's quite basic. I get what you're trying to say with all the sentences. Totally get it. Really, really helps. I actually got my siblings to read it back to each of my statements. I did it with one of my friends, and then I gave it to my siblings afterwards to read it when I went numb to all the words, and they were really good at it because they could understand what I was trying to say. You don't really need to name things that aren't relevant. Like I said initially, you have 4,000 characters. Everything you put down has to have an impact. It has to be meaningful. You don't need to, like I explained, you don't need to start putting the names of places down, or you've done work experience in this place, which is in this location, in this area, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You don't need to write all that. You can say you've done work experience in this practice, and then what did you learn from it? For example, if that's what you've done. Like I said, always reflect back on it. There's a sentence that says anything not linked to dentistry. Now, it depends what you're trying to say. There could be something you've done which is important and sets you apart. Write that down. You can have other things you've done which set you apart but might not have as much impact as some of the other things you're saying. So prioritize what's more important. It's like we said initially, quite a lot of people have said it, is write everything down on a piece of paper and then prioritize them. What's more important in that list to say what you're trying to say. So if you're trying to say, I'm really good at working in a team, you've been in a sports club, you've got a job on the side, and I don't know, you do something else. Which one of them is really important to get that message across? Write that down. You don't need to write all three for the same point. Elaborate language, we've mentioned it before. Don't use jargon that you don't understand. Don't use big words to sound smart. you can, and it has happened to people, got called out before. I'm quite fortunate that I've been part of the MMIs in Glasgow a couple of times, helping out, assisting. And, you know, you hear people come out and they mention those sentences, or they mention things that have happened. And you'd be surprised how many people can't get caught out on stuff like this, where they've just written something and they've come back and they're like, I totally forgot what it meant, or I didn't read it enough. So just, you know, be yourself. Yeah, just unnecessary verbs really. But again, all it means is write your personal statement, write your draft first, prioritize what you think is more important for each of the points, then write your first draft, get it all together how you think it sounds good, take a break, go back into it, cut it down more and more and more till you're really happy with the way it sounds. It doesn't have to be all 4,000 characters, by the way. It can be less, it's absolutely fine, as long as it says what you want it to say and you come across really well in it. And then get other people to read it and make sure they can understand it too. I think that's it for me. I'll pass it back to Cal.
Catherine, do you want to just finalise these last few points on the final checks?
Yeah, so obviously once you're happy with your personal statement, then of course you need to make your final checks. This just includes things like grammar, punctuation, spelling. Make sure that you've included a variety of sentence lengths, as this makes it much easier to read. Ensure there aren't any abbreviated words such as don't, as this is considered too informal. This is the sort of thing that you'll be doing kind of at the very, very end, around October time though, when you're happy with the content. You don't really need to focus on these bits whilst you're writing it too much.
Okay, so that was really, really useful. I think we're going to have quite a few questions regarding questions on that, but we will answer them as we're going along. We'll take a small break towards the end. I'm going to introduce Haroon, who is currently a offer holder. He's going to be talking about the very topical subject of medicine versus dentistry and how you choose between the two. So Haroon, I'll let you have the mic.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, that's great.
Oh yeah, that's good. So both medicine and dentistry are both professions that people put together because they have a lot of the same skills that are required, similar A-levels that are required. They both involve communication, they both involve helping patients, they both involve manual dexterity to an extent, teamwork. And a lot of us are often in a pickle. Where do we go? Which one do you go down, medicine or dentistry? And I was certainly in this situation when I was applying. But then I did a lot of looking into it, and this is the sort of points that I've come through all that. So it's first of all not a light decision, because both these careers are both 5-year degrees, so you can't just, you need to be very certain about which one you're going to go down. And I really think you can't say one profession is better than the other. It's about looking at your own character and how do you want to do things, and then judging based on that which career to pick. So my first point is the combination of the role of the physician and surgeon into one. So when a patient comes in as a dentist, you are not just treating them as a set of teeth, you're treating them as an individual. They're going to come in, they're going to sit down on a chair, you're going to diagnose them using both medical and dental history, you're going to talk to them a bunch, you're going to plan, you're going to look, do a lot of deep thought and problem solving. And that's very similar to that of a physician in a medical setting. But then you're also going to be carrying out the role of the surgery. So you're going to be diagnosing and treating the patient. And that combines both halves of medicine into one. And that was something really interesting for me, because I enjoyed both halves of medicine and I did work experience in both halves of medicine. And the fact that dentistry allowed this was really, really amazing. Second of all, continuity of treatment. So as a dentist in a general practice setting, you are going to often have your patients for a long, long time. When I was doing work experience, my dentist patients were often patients of his or hers for 20 plus years, and their family as well. And having that continuity is really, really rewarding, because you can really see the change in their oral health. You can see the change in their confidence after that period of time. So rather than just referring to another doctor or another professional, you're doing a lot of it yourself, and that's really, really rewarding. And obviously you get that in medicine as well, but then you're missing out on some of the surgical aspects. So yeah. Third thing is the psychological impact. So it's well known that having a good smile really improves one's self-esteem. And if you've had any friends that have had braces, or you've had braces yourself, I'm sure you've seen this, because like after the braces, they're going to be smiling and they're going to be a bit bubbly, and that's just the impact of braces. But if you've had someone with certain teeth issues or dental issues, after the work with the dentist, they're so much more confident, so much happier. So much so, I read a statistic on dentistry.co.uk a few days ago saying that 53%, I think, of the population, I think under 30 something, have had dental work in the UK, cosmetic dental work. So that showed the big impact. Over 50% of people. So it's not just a hinge thing. It's a really big thing. So yeah, and additionally, you're not just going to be, when you're treating any patient for a cosmetic issue specifically, you're going to be looking at their motivation for getting that entire treatment. So you're going to have to do an assessment based on that, and that brings in a lot of psychological knowledge, and you study a lot of psychology at university. So that combines that whole thing into it, and that's also in itself really rewarding. So you're not just treating their teeth, you're treating them as an individual, seeing like why are they actually going down this whole, why do they want to get this veneers or these veneers, or why do they want to get this facial aesthetic treatment. Fourth thing on the points is the wide impact of dentistry. So many people just think, you know what, their teeth, like why are they that important, and no one really cares. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, within dentistry, within like a person's health, oral health is one of the most important parts. So a statistic for you guys that I read in a book somewhere, or maybe online, I can't remember, but 90% of systemic conditions, so i.e. conditions of the entire body, you can see within the mouth. That's 90%. And there are signs for things like Alzheimer's, things like heart disease, things like stroke, preterm birth, all these different conditions you can see within the mouth. And like the fact that you can do that allows you to prevent things later on. And we all know that prevention is better than cure. It's one of the principles of medicine and dentistry. So you can prevent these things and often point out these things before a doctor would. So I'm not discounting the role of a doctor, because obviously we know the impact of being a doctor, but dentists do have a really big impact, and we shouldn't forget this. And then the fifth point is that of work-life balance. Obviously, this shouldn't be your main motivation of going to dentistry or medicine, because there are other careers that will have far better work-life balance than either of those two careers. But ultimately, dentistry does offer a good work-life balance, generally in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to medicine, especially compared to surgery. Something that I noticed when I went on my work experience. So look into that. And then the sixth thing is that of career progression. Obviously, Cal, who's a qualified dentist, knows a bit more about this, so I'd let him take the mic on this if he can.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of career progression, dentistry, it really is a multifaceted career which allows you to branch out to so many different things. It gives you so many different opportunities. And I know that as a college student, when I was looking into dentistry, I only had a very tunnel vision as to, you know, dentists work in a high street and they quickly look at my mouth and they do a scale and polish, for instance. But that is absolutely not what it is really. Dentistry has so many more options, from working in a high street practice as a general dental surgeon to working as for instance, a special care dentist, where you're looking after people with who are have high medical conditions, who are on many medications or come from vulnerable groups, to working as a specialist in one of the sort of specialist fields, for instance, root canal therapy as an endodontist, or for instance, taking out wisdom teeth as an oral surgery specialist, to managing people with very complex dental needs as a restorative dental consultant. So there's so many different options that you can choose. In terms of sort of finishing dentistry, you will go into something called a foundation dentistry job, which is what actually Dr. Priya Sharma and Dr. Anand Chowdhury are now going to embark on. So this is a year's training whereby you're under the wing of a qualified dentist, and actually it's almost 100% of dental graduates will likely get that job, so that the actual career success and the success rate of an individual getting a job following their degree is very high. So that's a very, very attractive point as well. But in terms of the career, there's a lot of options, from working within a primary care setting to working in secondary care, in hospitals as well. So there's quite a variation and a scope. So I think in terms of that, it's a very attractive career. One interesting point as well is that I know that Jas mentioned this, is that it caters well for women. So as a dentist, you'll be working, most likely working as a self-employed professional within the high street, within primary care. And ultimately, you can have the option and the flexibility of potentially working part-time. So therefore, it's very good to balance your career with your personal life. So for instance, if you've got children, or if you've got other personal hobbies or sort of activities that you want to keep a couple of days free, it has that ability to be flexible in that regard. So there's quite a lot of scope as a dentist. Hopefully that would answer some of your questions. I don't think I want to go too far into it, because at this stage it's important to appreciate the scope of a dentist. But I think what's really, really important is understanding as well the characteristics, traits and behaviours of a dentist, and determining whether this is a career for you. I know that we had a question regarding how did you find out whether you wanted to sort of become a dentist. So I would ask if Priya, you want to just mention what led you on to studying dentistry as a student.
Hi, so yeah, the reasons that I wanted to do dentistry in the first place, is that what we're asking?
That's right, yeah. So someone's asked, how do you actually know that you wanted to become a dentist?
Okay.
Because it's not that we wake up one day and we want to pursue looking at teeth and fixing and managing dental
No,
conditions.
of course. Of course, no one is born, unfortunately, I don't know why, just wanting to be a dentist. It does come from experiences and research. But I think in my case, so number one, having done GCSEs, you kind of form this liking to sciences, or you know that you're doing well with sciences, and you're thinking, okay, great, what kind of jobs might be applicable to me? And then I think general personality traits. So if you know that you're kind of caring and you would like to take care of patients, then you start narrowing it onto this topic of medicine or dentistry, which Haroon has spoken about. But for me, I think that edge on why I really thought dentistry was for me was I actually did work experience in both places, and with dentistry, so rapport with the patient and have such good communication, whilst also being very practical and doing. It's come up that my internet is unstable. I hope that you can hear me. But they're so practical at the same time. So I really liked that aspect. So I hope that that's helped. I don't know if anybody has any more points on why dentistry. But yeah, I certainly didn't really even consider teeth before being an actual student.
Yeah, does anyone want to add to that point?
Just something that I feel Haroon's also covered, but something that really attracted me towards the career was the career progression opportunities. I feel like as a dentist, you will always be sort of inclined to continue to develop yourself, continue to go from strength to strength, because that's just the nature of the career. So if you're someone who doesn't want to just hit a point, but wants to keep on going to continue to towards improving yourself and developing yourself, then you can certainly do that from medicine or dentistry. But if you're someone who's sort of practically inclined and you prefer the sort of dental environment, then I'd say dentistry is something that will definitely appeal to you.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I would echo that. I think dentistry really allows an individual to strive to just keep on improving. It's a career of lifelong learning. You'll never ever feel that you're completely stable and you've completed everything. There's always something to learn. Dentistry is also a field and a science and a healthcare profession which is surrounded by lots of technology. And we are in the forefront of technology at the moment with digital dentistry, with using 3D scanners, with using CAD/CAM technology, with using artificial intelligence. And with the way that things are going with COVID-19, a lot of patients are receiving virtual consultations. We're using technology. We're really incorporating technology in our daily clinical practice, in our workflow. So that's another thing which is quite attractive to dentistry, and certainly attracted to me, was the fact that there is constant sort of lifelong learning and the ability to integrate really fascinating technologies. In addition to that, it's a very practical career. It's a vocational career. It's something where you're fully involved. You're, like Haroon said, you are very much diagnosing as well as treating. Whereas, for instance, a doctor may see and diagnose a patient. They may refer that patient on to a particular specialist to then embark on that particular surgery, the practical treatment. And usually a lot of treatments are done under general anaesthetic as a surgeon. So if you imagine like an orthopedic surgeon, they'll be doing a lot of treatment under general anaesthetic where the patient is asleep. Now, with a dentist, you have the fortune and sometimes the challenge of managing patients with anxiety and having excellent communication skills. So therefore, that's something that's quite different to medicine. You're actually seeing, diagnosing, and then treating the patient, and even dealing with that patient under local anaesthetic. So a lot of the treatment that you're doing will require not only clinical skills, which you'll learn and pick up at dental school, but also the communication skills and the anxiety management skills as well, which is really, really important. Okay, so we've got some questions coming in through the chat. So I was thinking of doing a small project on the effects of sugar tax in the UK. Is it worth doing this for myself or as an EPQ? I asked the question just as we all had to leave and join. I don't think it got answered. I think, Catherine, do you want to answer this question?
Yep, just unmuting myself. Yeah, so I just quickly answered that one in the chat. So, I mean, there's benefits to both. I'd say it probably doesn't really make much difference because although EPQ is a recognised qualification, it doesn't count towards your A-levels or anything. The only thing is that you could probably put it down on your UCAS, and it is something that's a bit more recognised. But if you do just do it by yourself and maybe do a presentation or something, or write up something yourself, that does show that you're really proactive and not just doing something to get that qualification. It does show that maybe you've got a bit more interest in it and you can kind of take it your own way rather than having to stick to the EPQ formula, really. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of completely up to you. I think especially at this point, you may not have enough time to do it like specifically as an EPQ and get it marked anyway before October. So yeah.
Excellent. We've also got another question here on, in terms of multiple instruments. So if someone plays multiple instruments, which one would you talk about? So Andrew, do you want to turn your mic on if you're there?
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can. So do you want to just ask that question live?
Yes, I was wondering, if you play multiple instruments, which one would you list? Would you list like the one you're most skilled in, or just really which one to list?
Yeah, fantastic. So it would really, I'd direct that question to Haroon.
Yeah, so I did multiple instruments as well. But in terms of this, I would probably put the instrument that you are in, if you're in any orchestras, any bands, I would recommend putting that instrument down. You could also put down the instrument you spent the most time in. So perhaps if you're a higher grade in that, or you spent just generally more time in it, but there's no, you can put any instrument. It's just, it's not like an application requirement. But just in summary, yeah, the one you spend the most time in, you've got the highest grade in, and probably best of all, if you're in bands, right, put the instrument down.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
No problems. Okay. So I know we had a question about maxillofacial surgery earlier, and I know that we had a couple of answers to that. I'd just like to add my personal view on that as well. So MaxFax is a specialism of dentistry. It's one of the 13 specialties. Now, the majority of individuals that go and pursue maxillofacial surgery do tend to go through dentistry first. It gives you more exposure of oral and maxillofacial surgery, and you get a better indication of what the surgery involves. In addition to that, you're able to do jobs such as dental core training jobs and other jobs which will give you greater insight before you actually embark on that career. And I know that in terms of that career specialty, it is a very, very specialist career. So I think making your mind up at this moment, I would say that it's not a decision that you have to make now. It is worth you definitely considering whether where you feel that you'll be more comfortable with medicine or dentistry as a first thing, and maybe taking a year out may be wise to gather some information and gather your thoughts on that. So hopefully that helps you. Next question is by Ria. Ria, do you want to turn your mic on?
Yeah, I was just wondering about which hobbies to put in your personal statement, because I've just filled out a form for college about different hobbies to add in the personal statement, and I was looking at which one would be the most important to emphasize.
Yeah, okay, so does one of our team members want to answer that?
Yeah, so I think gardening's a great hobby. It's more often than not that someone on the admissions team will read something and also just relate to it. So it's always a good idea to put anything that you've got going on down, just to show that you're not just focused on getting those good grades. I mean, if you think that there's other hobbies that you'd rather talk about that show more manual dexterity skills or more team working involvement, then maybe focus on them. But just make sure that you're not selling yourself short. Even if it's another hobby, maybe you like cake baking, you can link it to you can still link it to dentistry. So definitely go for it, I'd say.
Thank you very much, Priya. That's really, really useful. Whilst we answer the questions, I've just got some more polls that if the remaining 60 people could kindly answer, that would really be useful for us. These are directly related to the services that we'll be likely launching. Another question we've got is from Haja, which is it essential to read a book and reflect rather than doing the Discover Dentistry course and reflecting? Bilal.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have done the Discover Dentistry course. So it's a good baseline to have because it does teach you, some really important things about dentistry, like the roles of everyone in the dental team, some of the basic procedures, some of the basic dental treatments. And it's all well and good to show the universities you have an understanding of that, but I think it is something that a lot of applicants have done. So if you want to stand out a bit more, then mentioning a book would be a really good idea. Remember, one of the key skills in the personal statement is reflection, and we've talked about that a lot today. Whatever it is you mention, it's all about reflecting. So you could have read 50 books, and then an applicant could have read one book. But if that applicant who read one book reflects on it a lot better, his personal or her personal statement will end up looking a lot better in that section. So yes, I definitely recommend to read a book as well, but make sure that you're reflecting on it and just putting a focus on what you've learned from reading it and what you enjoyed as well.
Has anyone else got anything to add on that? No worries. Okay, so another question that we've had is, do you think signing up for head girl / prefect is a good idea? It is time consuming, but do you think it would be valuable? Raza, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good initiative to take if you do go for the role. It will require like extra commitment, like you might have to stay behind on schools for some day and talk to teachers. But overall, when I became head boy, it was a great experience. I mean, I was allowed to like interview some potential teachers that would join the school, which was pretty cool. You get to make some cool changes to the school, and it's just something that you can take away for the rest of your life, essentially. So it's a very special position to be in, and relating it to dentistry is really quite easy because it already shows that you stand out, because not many people would have the chance to become the head boy or the head girl. And yeah, it's just a great thing to commit to. It does show that you have commitment and you're responsible, because you can manage your time already at GCSE with extra commitments. But if you do that at that stage, it's really good to mention. It'll make you stand out. Of course, even the admissions team would kind of recognize that, okay, they've probably already been in that pressured situation where they've had to like deliver an assembly or something. So yeah, it's a good thing to mention. And if you do get the role, you should be really proud of it. I'd recommend, if you are up for it, do go for it. It's a great opportunity, something you can take away from the school as well. So yeah, take up anything that comes your way. It could be the deciding factor.
And I believe that, I do apologize, we have missed out a question about language. Haroon, do you want to just cover that one?
Sure. Yeah. As someone who also has learnt a language outside of, actually, that's why I did a gap year, to learn language. But yeah, so in terms of language writing, language speaking, it actually puts you at a really big advantage, because it shows you that you're not just sort of biology, chemistry, maths. You're very broad, and that is something that can be looked upon really favorably. Also, it allows you to talk to more patients and interact with them in their own native language. I'm actually, Cal, can you confirm this? I would believe that you'd have to speak in English to your patients, because the nurse has to understand for.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, ignore that point about talking to patients.
It is useful in emergency situations, though. I don't think you can discount that. So I do think learning a language shows that you're an effective communicator as well. So I think that it is a valuable trait to have.
Yeah, and learning a language is a key to culture. So you understand a whole different person's culture, so a whole different group's culture. So that would be really, really useful. So yeah, I'd highly recommend mentioning that, especially if you're at a good level.
A few more questions that we've got in here. If you're a gap year student and you've written your personal statement, if I use elements from my previous personal statement, is that still considered plagiarism? Jas, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so I personally use elements from my previous statement, but I just didn't use it word for word. So just rearrange how you've written it. There's often better ways you can write it when you look back in hindsight. And also, I found that because of my gap year, I had a lot more stuff to talk about anyway, so I didn't really need to use much from my previous statement because a lot had changed. So maybe, for example, if I put that I was a prefect in my first personal statement, in my gap, to show that I had leadership, in my gap year I became a duty manager of a sports centre, and that was a better showing of leadership. So you can often just kind of sub things in and out. And so yes, you can use parts of it, but a lot of it you'll naturally expand on anyway. So don't copy it word for word, I'd say. And another thing is that we've got a lot of questions on like, oh, I do this activity, is it good for my statement, is it not? I think Catherine wrote a really good like warning on there that you can literally relate anything to dentistry if you wanted to, and it's not dentistry specific, it's not just manual dexterity, it's the attributes, so teamwork, leadership, communication skills, all of that. So I think someone said baking, for example. Baking can be linked back as simple as following instructions. For a lot of procedures that we do in dentistry, you have to follow instructions word for word, and that's how you learn dentistry, is someone shows you, you do, and it's kind of like that. So with baking, there are step instructions that you have to follow. and meticulously to get things right, and it's like you have to do it with care. So anything you can relate back. But just try and prioritize, like what sounds better, what shows more attributes. Don't just throw it in and try and relate it first, then put it in, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. We had one point which was if you don't get the grades to get into dentistry and you go through clearing, does that mean you can't do dentistry? What would you do next? So I think this is just a point which refers to if you've attained an offer but you then don't get the grades, what could individuals consider?
So I didn't get the grades, but I got the offer, so I was that situation. So you either take a gap year and just accept that you want to reapply. You can do a degree in a different subject. So Vinny spoke about that earlier, but there are specific ones that put you at a higher stead compared to other ones, but also make sure that you still want to do it just in case you don't get into dentistry, and that, if that makes sense. And I think it was a bit confused in the sense clearing happens as your first thing to do. So when you're on results day, you go through clearing to see if there's any spaces to try and get into dentistry that year. If you don't get spaces in clearing, that doesn't mean that you stop there. You can then take time out and reapply. It doesn't go against you if you tried to go through clearing and failed, if that makes sense. So clearing is to try and get into dentistry immediately after, on the day of results, whereas taking a gap year or doing a different degree is the long-term plan, if that makes sense. So for me, I just took a gap year, retook that exam I needed to retake, and then reapplied and got in, basically.
We have a question from Harriet. If I don't get into dentistry, would hygiene or hygiene and therapy be another option? Vinny, do you want to touch upon that?
Yeah, no problem. Depends if that's something you're going to be interested in. Obviously, you get the aspects of dentistry within that. So yeah, it's a very viable option. Some of my friends have done that and then pursued dentistry afterwards, or vice versa. Someone stayed into that because they really enjoyed it. So yeah, 100% it is another option. Just depends if you want to invest into that degree and go down that road, because obviously that will take a bit of time. Or if you want to take a gap year or do a different option, as just you mentioned, and then go back into dentistry or reapply.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it is certainly an option that you can put down as a backup, but you want to consider it seriously as to whether you would want to pursue that. It probably does come as the closest degree, or would you agree, Vinny, to doing dentistry? And it probably is a fantastic course to do prior to studying dentistry, because you're gaining so many valuable crossover skills that would be useful as a dentist.
100%. I think some of my friends that have done that course and then gone into dentistry, they're ahead of the game, or ahead of us in essence, because obviously they know what the role entails. They've done some work, they know how to use the hand pieces. So they already know all this stuff and they have that background knowledge. So they've got that manual dexterity there. So yeah, you will be in a really, really good position. But like Callum was mentioned, it all depends if you want to invest into something. Because bear in mind, let's say you do the degree and for some reason you don't get into dentistry, are you happy still doing that? So really, really, really think about it and decide. But yeah, a fantastic option to get transferable skills.
Just on that, just to add, Plymouth does, if you're doing dental hygiene therapy, they do it with your first and second year dentist. So they actually sit in the same classroom with us, same setup, exactly same course for 2 years. And I know that they do offer you to sit your GAMSAT alongside your first year and then try and apply through dentistry. So after first year, move to the dental course because you're on the same course, if that makes sense. So phone up the dental schools, I'd say, if you're considering it, and just see if they have a pathway through it, because some of them do. I know Plymouth does. So just ask about that, because we sit the exact same course for 2 years.
I know it's the same at Newcastle as well. We see a lot of similarities, and there's that same pathway after first year. So I imagine that many others do as well.
Really,
Yeah,
really.
it's same for Leeds as well. The dental hygiene and therapy students, I think it's the first 2 or 3 years that they're actually with us in our clinics and everything. And I just want to say that if you are considering dental hygiene and therapy with your end goal being to get into dentistry, really consider it carefully, because of course there's many pathways which lead into dentistry, but just research around the career and make sure it's 100% what if you end up in a dental hygiene and therapy career and you can't transfer into dentistry, then make sure that you'd be happy with the career. So do your research prior to that, and make sure it's actually something that you'd enjoy, and you're not just doing it for the sake of a pathway into dentistry rather than that, because sometimes things don't go to plan and you might still not get the offer to do dentistry.
We just got a question from Alina. Did you want to ask a question? I know that your hand was raised.
I wasn't sure how to get rid of the hand, so
I'll lower it for you.
I do have a question though, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, please carry on.
So basically, I shadowed a cognitive behavioral therapist, which I know hasn't really got anything to do with dentistry. But one of the cases she was working with, one of the guys, he had a dental phobia, and basically she helped him like get into a dental. She helped him get into like basically go to the dentist and helped him out and stuff. So if I was to refer to that in my introduction and talk about why that is the reason for why I wanted to do dentistry and how I enjoyed how I witnessed how the dentist and the therapist work together to kind of get him to overcome his fear. How do I refer to it in my introduction, but then like repeat it kind of, but not, so like refer to it again in my main body paragraph, saying that I've done the work experience and that I've witnessed this, but then be at risk of repeating myself, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, no,
kind
totally.
of.
If you've actually mentioned CBT treatment and then you've seen that it's genuinely had an effect and on your personal beliefs, and you think that was a great way to move forward in terms of picking dentistry as a career, then certainly mention it. There's no reason for you not to. You'll just have to find the right way to mention it in your introduction, because it's a really good point and it's a very unique point. I'm pretty sure I haven't heard of anybody, picking dentistry because they've been CBT treatment and then they've, shadowed a therapist. So it's a very good option, but just make sure when you word it correctly. In terms of repetition, once you've mentioned it, that would be enough. You'd probably need to mention some other form of work experience, or if you can't obtain work experience, we do have a webinar on that next week, but I'm just going to briefly say that if you can't obtain work experience, it's probably a good time to show your initiative now by doing extra reading outside or outside of general practices, because they're unlikely to accept you. Go online, there's plenty of resources out there. We are developing a bespoke work experience course, which Catherine is a director for actually, and she's put a lot of effort into that. So that's another resource that you could use in terms of the work experience. But yeah, relating back to your point, it's a really good option to mention.
Yeah, like Raza said, it's about using the correct words. So I like how you said worked with the dentist. So I would focus on that bit that you said, like how did they work with the dentist? How did the dentist play a role in that? Don't just look at it from the cognitive behavioral side, because that's not what you're interested in. You're interested from the dental side. So is it something that you think you could bring into dental practices that could be done in the chair rather than going to cognitive behavioral places, things like that? So it's how you word it. Look at it from the dental side, not the cognitive side, basically.
So guys, I think we're coming up to the final few minutes of the webinar for tonight. I would like to thank everyone for sticking around with us despite our few technical glitches. If anyone does have any questions, we are here for another 4 minutes until past. If you've got any further questions, then please either pop your mic on and just go for it, or you can just pop it in the chat. I'm going to read out any questions that I've missed if I've missed any. Okay, here we've got another question. If a case is not very specific, is it worth mentioning from work experience? Bilal. you want to take that one?
Yeah, so if a case isn't specific, it doesn't mean that you can't still reflect on it. Of course, try to remember it as clearly as possible, because giving a brief description of what happened is important. But yeah, to be honest, in your work experience paragraph, because you are so limited for words, the amount of detail you need to go into about what happened in that case isn't as important. Like we said before, it's what you learned from that case about a dentist's role and what skills sort of applied. You know, how was the communication used? How was teamwork used? Or any other skill you feel relevant. So yeah, don't worry too much about the specifics, but as long as you can provide a general gist for what happened in that case, it should be all right. It is important to strike a balance between being too general and too specific. But as long as you can recall what happened and the key lessons from it, I think you should be okay.
That's really useful, thank you. So guys, I think that's all with the questions, I believe.